For everyone that's sort of in this space here, we're gonna, you got it? That's good. Everyone in this space here, we're going to, I want to welcome you all. This is a session called Clever by Design. And we're going to talk here with some really interesting people and have a conversation about how design and sustainability have come together, specifically in the outdoor industry, but also inspired by other work. So I'm your moderator for today. My name is Nicole Bassett. I'm one of the founders of the Renewal Workshop. We're a company that is enabling apparel and textile companies into the circular economy. So we work with a number of apparel brands on basically taking all of their waste material and putting it into a new economy. So this is how do we reuse product again? How do we repair? How do we recycle textiles? And so we're only 3 years old, but definitely inspired by designing a new type of economy. So I'm here with Jeremy Collins, who is the founder of Meridian Line, also a very talented artist, and Nikki Hodgson with the Outdoor Industry Association, leading the Sustainability Working Group. So we're going to start, we're going to just have a conversation. I want to invite all of you to share your questions and thoughts and ideas as well. But we're going to start with what does it mean for you on a personal level of the, design is a big word, okay? And it means a lot of things. It can mean materials, it can be inception of idea. But when you think about how do we look at design and sustainability, what are some of the first things that come to your mind? And then we're going to use that as part of our conversation.
Okay. So design and sustainability, first thing that comes to my mind. The first thing that comes to my mind is nudity, because that's the only sustainable design. And I think about, I just tripped into this panel, right?
Yeah.
I just fell right into here. And what's great is we just talked on the phone, 3 months ago about working together, and I didn't know you were moderating, so this is super exciting to engage in this way. I'm kind of joking, but kind of not. It's like, if we're talking apparel, which is what I've evolved into, the only sustainable way is to not design, is to not continually create more product. And so as a clothing designer, I'm looking at it going, clothes are going to get made whether I do it or somebody else does it. They're going to get made internationally whether I do it or somebody else does it. And so if we're going to choose to create more product and more clothing that goes out into the world, which is constantly being consumed, I have to decide whether I'm going to do it responsibly or not. And so for us at Meridian Line, it's like, okay, we're doing this. Okay, this is our skill set. This is what we bring to the world. So let's find the most responsible way to do it that we can, the most responsible materials and manufacturing practices. Otherwise, let's just go naked. We talk about like we sing, we greenwash everything. We sing the praises of what we're doing, but it's like, to me, choosing sustainable materials and practices for an apparel brand in our industry, that should be the low standard. Like, it's not something to be bragging about. It's like, oh, well, yeah, it should be assumed if you're in this space that you're doing your best to produce in a sustainable way.
Yeah, okay, we're going to talk more about that. But Nikki, how about you?
I love that. So for me at the Trade Association, one of the things that we do is we facilitate the collaborative group for the industry. So it's a few hundred outdoor industry companies who have been working together for the past 10 years really on establishing environmental and social responsibility best practices in the supply chain. And so I think, when we were first getting our start and we were thinking through, how do we assess and measure and what are the questions that we're asking about our environmental impact in the supply chain. And so many of the questions that we were asking at the end of the process were, I think the only way to really answer it was at the design phase. And so that's what we're starting to see now. But for me, when I think about design and sustainability, I think about some of these circular economy and end of use and repairability and all these questions that help us answer how do we make sure that as little of our product is ending up in landfills as possible.
Cool. So I'm actually going to ask both of you to elaborate a little bit more on some points. So I'll start with you, actually, Nikki. So maybe you could explain a little bit more of the context or history of this sustainability working group and how the outdoor industry is leading in that space. And for those of you who aren't as familiar, if you look at industries like maybe the general fashion and apparel industry or other consumer products industry, and you don't have a way to see outside of our own outdoor industry, the outdoor industry is leading in so many ways around materials, around thinking about manufacturing, about thinking about design. In a really broad way, and so and that's a huge amount of work because of what the Outdoor Industry Sustainability Working Group has done. So maybe could you talk a little bit of context about like what that work looks like, so that you can enable people in this room to be thinking about incorporating sustainability into design?
Yeah, definitely. So we got our start, I think this group, it's now managed by OIA, but it got its start in the outdoor industry, and it was really a number of years ago at OR when a handful of companies got together and started asking this question of how do we understand the environmental impact of our products? And the answer was that 2/3 of our impact was in the supply chain. And so to really understand that we can't handle this at an individual company level, that's a good place to start. But if we're really going to have an impact, we need to collaborate, and we need to have a common method of assessment and a common method of talking about sustainability. And so we developed this tool. It's now called the Higg Index, and it's basically a really robust supply chain assessment tool. But what it allows us to do is it allows us to find some of these priority impact areas. And I think, whether it's microfibers or energy and emissions reduction or chemicals management or animal welfare or social responsibility, there are so many impact areas. But one of the number ones that we're seeing really is on this end of life piece and the amount of our products that are ending up in landfills. And so for us now, we're thinking through one of the big sustainability questions that we're addressing as the outdoor industry in this collaborative space is how do we empower designers with these product tools, and how do we collaborate together to address some of these big topics around waste in the production process, or empowering our consumers around repairability and designing products for repairability, or designing products that can be easily recycled. I know for footwear and a lot of our hard goods products, that's a big question. So I think for me, in terms of beginning to answer these questions, I would definitely encourage folks to start to look at those tools like the Higg Index or engage in this collaborative space, because a lot of these design and sustainability questions are big questions, and I don't think they're questions that we can answer individually. I think we have to answer in this kind of collaborative space.
So Jeremy, you touched on, I think, the elephant in the room at most companies is this relationship or this tension between this desire of sustainability and the fact that you are a company that makes things. I know you won't necessarily say this, but I'm going to say it for you, is you guys have really embraced it in a big way at Meridian Line, have been incorporated as an and, not an or. And I want you to talk about what that tension feels like on a day-to-day and how you guys balance with that.
Yeah, it certainly is a tension, and it starts from the beginning. One of the things that we've tried to pay attention to is what we do on a small level is what we're going to do on a big level. So Meridian Line started just as a graphic brand, just based on my art library, t-shirts, hats, hoodies, a simple product. But there's an opportunity there to do it right. So, okay, if we're going to do t-shirts, is it cotton? Is it organic cotton? If it's a blend, is it recycled poly? And so starting at the starting line, we wanted to do what we could at the small end. Is it plastisol? Is it water-based ink? It's like, oh, it's so simple. It's a graphic t-shirt and it's a hat. But now here we are moving into denim, and we're moving into apparel, women's and men's apparel. It's like, okay, because of the decisions that we made 5 years ago to use water-based ink, to use organic cotton, to use recycled poly, now that's just become part of our DNA. And it's not, like I was saying, it's not something we want to brag about. We're proud of it, but it's Benji and I have been in this space long enough that it's not a big decision. We want to move into a new product. Okay, let's go hunt for a way to make this in a sustainable way. And you're talking about how it impacts design. Yeah, using sustainable materials it impacts the fit, it impacts the weight, it impacts the functionality, sometimes in a negative way. And I don't know if that answers your question.
That's good. No, that's helpful. I mean, I think that the complexity of the solution is just needs to be known, because a lot of people who are trying to explore sustainability in the business ops as well as in design are sort of like, am I doing it wrong because this is really hard? And the reality is you're doing it right if it's really hard. The other thing around design that you guys touched a little bit on, but I want to explore more, is the idea of the difference in design in business models as well, and where inspiration comes from. So it's not just product and it's not just materials itself. So I'll give an example to sort of preface this. Is like, when we started the Renewal Workshop, one of the things we look to is where is there success in more sustainable business models and more sustainable practices. And two things definitely inspired us. One was just nature itself. Like, there's no waste in nature. The leaves fall from the tree, they fall on the ground, they become nutritious for soil, and then we just continue this cycle. And so that was a thought of like, oh, how could apparel companies start to act like that? The other is on the business model side is we're not going to go basically from nothing today to becoming trees by any stretch. And then but we're going to have to figure out in-betweens. And one of the things that we found is like the car industry. So the car industry makes money today from both new and pre-owned certified, right? And that is a business model that isn't scary anymore. And so I wanted to ask both of you, what are things out there that you guys have been seeing and in your own businesses that has influenced your own businesses in the world, either in nature or in actual business models, that's getting you thinking about what is the future? And whichever,
I mean, I can answer that from kind of our perspective in this collaborative group and how we engage. I think, it kind of goes back to this piece when we were thinking through our impact. We were looking at kind of the impact of the products once they were manufactured. And I think the trend that we're seeing, and what's really inspiring to me, is that we're now starting to think through this at the product's inception, at that design piece of, how do we design for functionality and durability and sustainability and using, the best products that are available. And I think what I'm really inspired by is we have our sustainability working group meetings that happened prior to the show, and one of the conversations that we were having is about putting together workshops for designers and waste management professionals and materials experts, so that we're bringing groups together that don't necessarily operate in the same spaces, but have a big impact in finding a solution around sustainability and design. And so for me, I think the inspiration is seeing, I feel like we have a history of being very siloed, even within the outdoor industry or within our own little groups, within sustainability. And so what I'm really inspired by is having these conversations now and seeing that, so that we're looking at these systems change, right? It's not just at a product by product level, but if we're having designers and we're having waste management professionals and we're having materials experts sitting down and thinking through this and thinking, okay, how do we innovate around materials? How do we address end-of-life options? How do we design for recyclability? How do we improve infrastructure? And so it's these huge conversations that are happening. For me, it really feels like, okay, we could leverage this. We could really influence the entire system and the entire way that we manufacture and design things, which is really exciting.
And for me, the accountability ingredient is really attractive. The Higg Index, and like Patagonia does their footprint chronicles, and you follow the path of a product from birth to rack. And we make no assumptions about material. Like organic cotton, okay, we're not drinking from the Kool-Aid. We want to research and find out, is this the right thing? How much water usage per shirt are we doing? Okay, we're going to use recycled poly. Well, that's kind of the standard right now, we feel like, but there's, is it hemp? Is it coconut fiber? Keeping an open mind about what's next for us.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask, I love that you brought up materials, and because I think there's something about, like, there's this opportunity out there, right? Like, everything is an opportunity. And I think especially with the recent IPCC report around climate change, and that we've got 12 years to change course, right? We have to get bigger and bolder and start to look at things in a new way. I also know, like, all the companies in this building are on a cycle, and you've got deadlines and time. Guess what? We didn't get extra days in the week or hours in the day, that kind of thing. So how are you keeping yourself sort of open to exploring and seeing the new and bringing that in at the same time as balancing the cycle that you have to be in for the sales cycle?
Well, for us, that's a commitment internally. So Benji and I and our team, that's a commitment. Our materials and our sustainable approach. Now, Benji is kind of our ringleader, but we have to call each other on it. You know, we recently had a deadline we had to hit for a product, and we couldn't find it on organic cotton, and we had to decide, okay, these POs have been placed. You know, money is there waiting for. Are we willing to sacrifice for this? And then we have to go, okay, is this a 6-month decision? Is this a 1-year decision? Is this a 10-year decision? And keeping each other accountable. And then also you've got customers, retailers, sales reps back to us. We have to answer to those people too. And going back to the Higg Index, I think there are times when the only answer is a sacrifice of some sort. As long as you're honest about it, to me, having that vulnerability and that accountability is just as important as doing your best. For us, so far it's been doing our best.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo that, I would say for us, it's not, we always say it's not about the score. It's not about the Higg Index score. And I think the most important thing in any sustainability conversation is accountability, or not accountability, that is important, but authenticity. And just saying, like, we don't have all the answers. I mean, we're writing this playbook as we go. And so I think it is really important to just know that we're operating in a very challenging environment and we're doing the best that we can. And that's just something that, you know, especially in the sustainability working group, that's really what we stress is it's not perfect. It's the best that we can do in that moment. And I think for me, sustainability really is about that question of asking ourselves, how do we do this better? And that's a question that we can be asking ourselves every single day at a personal and professional level. And we're not always going to be, we're not always able to make, the most sustainable choices, but we can always be thinking, okay, what's the best thing that I can do? How can I be as transparent? I mean, for sustainability and supply chain, it's transparency and it's visibility. And so I think, that just having that transparency into what you're doing and the thought process and bringing folks into that process is really powerful when we talk about sustainability conversations.
Well, and on a personal level, like you're asking about art, before we started here, you're asking about art and sustainability. It's like my personal medium is paper. Like I draw on paper, and I've tried the 97% post-consumer waste, and it's like I don't like it. And so like I use a non-recycled paper to do my art on. It's like there has to be some exceptions here.
Yeah. So here's a design challenge for both of you. These are totally put on the spot. This is unfair to them completely. But let's imagine we're in 12 years from now, and your decisions are actually getting made by carbon constraints. And so your supply chain is smaller, your variability of materials is smaller. What do you think the core tenets of how you will maintain your operations? What will that still be there? How will they still be there in this constrained world? Because ultimately, where we're going as an entity is that the constraints are going to become more obvious on us, and so designing within those constraints is going to be a skill that we're going to have to all develop.
As a designer, I think constraints are a benefit. I think. I hate to go back to Patagonia, but cause no unnecessary harm, that's their thing. And that's a complicated statement if you pick it apart. Like, cause no unnecessary harm? Like, is it necessary to have, 45 SKUs instead of 12? Is it necessary to have 10 different styles within one design, so one pattern? And half of them are responsibly sourced and the other half aren't. So we go, well, we did good over here, but we didn't do good over here. I think that restraints gives you freedom. And I don't know about 12 years from now. I don't know if we'll all be here or not.
I mean, I think it's a great question because for me, a lot of these sustainability questions around efficiency and highlighting efficiency. And it goes back to that piece of we have to think about the end of life of our product. We have to think about how do we extend the length of our product, and that's why durability is such an important sustainability question and why we advocated so hard for it to be included in the Higg Index. and just the product care and repair and the end of life questions. And so I think for us, we're already starting to think through that, but I see, in 12 years, we're going to be pushed even further in that direction by necessity of just like, you cannot design a product that, it ends up in the landfill, or most of it ends up in the landfill. Like at the design phase, you are going to have to figure this out, or in the production scrap, right? And I mean, some of these solutions are simple, like marker efficiency and redesigning the way that, that's laid out so that you're eliminating as much production scrap as possible. So I think, I do agree in some respects that it does drive innovation, and it is sometimes a gift, and I think it'll just accelerate that. I guess my concern is that puts a lot of pressure on small business and small suppliers, and so I think this is why we advocate so hard for getting out in front of these issues and thinking about the sustainability strategy and being a part of these initiatives now, because I think, yes, we'll figure it out, but I do think that's going to have a big impact on smaller businesses.
And I think about innovation in technical soft goods, and I think of it, and I look at every one of these products and I go, planned obsolescence, like, because we're forced into being lighter and lighter. The products have such a shorter lifespan, and so you look at something made 20 years ago that still exists, and then you look at something made 4 years ago that doesn't. That competition to be lighter is forced us into obsolescence, where it's going to the landfill. We've got a product that there's nothing else to do with this product. It's a zipper and some threads hanging off your shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, the one other thing I would say to that too is just making sure that we have infrastructure that supports innovation. So a great example is just the polybag and packaging issue is a big issue for us, and there's been some innovation around compostable and biodegradable polybags, but unless you have an industrial composter, unless you have the recycling infrastructure for it, or consumer education, then that innovation doesn't really go anywhere. It just ends up back in the landfill and causes as many problems as a traditional or conventional polybag. And so I think for us that's a big issue too, is that it can't just remain in industry, it can't just remain at the innovation level. We also have to think through infrastructure changes and engaging with our municipalities and thinking through, it's systems change. I think it's a big thing for us, and in terms of the 12 years and the constrained resources, we have to address systems change, and we have to do it now.
Yeah, and that's a great call out is where, if anyone who is in small businesses, like how do you leverage the resources that are out there? And the fact that the outdoor industry has seen that and put together the sustainability working group to say you don't have to solve it on your own, we'll be here to support that. I think it's huge. Very cool. Well, I actually want to, I know there's not a lot of you, but if any of you have questions and want to talk about those panels around Clever by Design, where are we clever with our design, where are we not clever with our design, and we have Jeremy Collins from Meridian Line and Nikki Hodgson from OIA, so lift your paw.
Just force them to ask a question.
Questions? Oh, you have a question, sir. What would your question be?
How do we get more people here?
How do we get more people here? Well,
I mean, seriously, this is a huge issue, and we need more participants and interested people following that.
I can repeat the question. Yeah, it's the question is, why are there more people engaged in sustainability and design? It's a great question. Do you have burning thoughts? Okay.
I mean, I think specifically here, I mean, maybe it wasn't advertised. I don't know. There's no signage. It took me a while to find it too. But I think that is a hot conversation, especially within the brands, and also sitting down with a retailer. They want to know. They want to know, how are you making this? How's it being shipped? You're talking about poly bags, and I'm sitting here listening and thinking, I'm kind of a new kid on the block as far as manufacturing, and I'm getting educated. I'm going from empathy to sympathy, going, oh wow, this is hard to figure out. Like, you can look at a company and go, okay, they're using poly bags for everything. That's not sustainable. But then you get on this side. I always say it's this side of the carpet because it's softer. The carpet inside the booths is softer than the aisle carpet. So you get on that side of the carpet, and it's like, oh, this is a real challenge because we have to get these products to the consumer, or at least to the retailer, and there's got to be, it's got to be protected from the elements, from getting wet during shipment. And like, this is an actual a design challenge for the brand. Where you have good intentions, but it's something that we're up against.
That's a great question. I ask myself that question all the time. And in fact, so before every summer and winter market, we host 2 days of sustainability working group meetings. And we usually have 120 to 150 people in the room, which is great, talking about these issues when you think about the number of people who are on this trade show floor. And so for us, it's, how do we engage people? How do we bring more people into this conversation? And I think sometimes it is a little overwhelming, and our messaging is that, we're here to help and we're here to support, and this collaborative network is there for that. I do think we will see more engagement as we see more asks from retailers. So we've started to see REI and MEC definitely asking their vendors to start thinking through these things, and we've definitely been responding to that and providing more support and trying to do regional trainings. Like we have sustainability boot camps that are coming up for 2019, and just trying to get more spaces and more venues for people to kind of be involved in this conversation, because it's really important.
If you really want to get depressed, go behind a convention center after a show like this. And so, I've been coming to this show for almost 20 years, and when you go behind the building, you go, that's us back there. And so, my first OR was 4 years ago, and so we built our booth out of abandoned pallets that get dumped behind the building. And I thought if I was really mean, I could use the pallets that have all the other brands' logos emblazoned on them. Yeah, but I chose not to do that. But we did use abandoned pallets because it's like that back there is us too. Like all this discussion is us, but it's also like look behind the building afterwards. All that mountain of trash that is discarded from a show, and it's like that's us back there.
No, I think it's a good question, and I think also it's like what do you have control of and what can you change? And so what starts with personal accountability, like where you make your own personal decisions, the brands you buy, and making sure you're a voice and saying this is important to me. The more that, every brand here is like, what does my consumer want? And if you are a consumer and you say this is what I want, then it starts to get heard over time. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, kind sir. What are you doing later? Others, thoughts? Is this interesting to you guys?
Yes.
That's awesome.
I live with this every day. It's very interesting.
That's my husband. Awesome. Well, I want to thank Nikki and Jeremy for your time and your insights and sharing a little bit of honest truth here with us. And Clever by Design. You're all clever. You love design. You can do it.
Thank you.
All right.